You know, guys, we might get a chuckle out of whether or not our wives or our girlfriends, or actually, come to think of it, some of you may have both of them. And hey, far be it from me to pass judgment. I'll just leave it at that. But we may get a good laugh out of when they start price shopping for the best bargain out there, whether it's at, Target and Kohl's or their local supermarket, whatever. But listen, why shouldn't you be doing the same when it comes to price shopping among sports books? I have always said you've got to have at least two options, and you have to be sensitive of what the sports books are doing out there against you. I don't care whether you're playing in Vegas or you're playing offshore. I don't care if you're playing with your local bookmaker around the corner, because listen, let's be honest. Most of those local bookmakers, they're not local anymore. Most of them are funneling their action through an offshore sports book anyway. And guys, you have to be aware. Let's take a case of offshore books. There are a couple of big offshore books, and I'm not going to give you your names, but you can figure it out on your own, okay? Where generally you are always paying at least a half point more for favorites. Well, it sucks if you're playing the chalks, but if you're playing dogs, that's great, because you don't have to buy insurance. You don't have to buy that extra half point when the line crosses 3, 4, 7, or 10, because you're going to get it anyway for free, right? At the same time, though, whether you're on that favorite or whether you're on the dog, you've also got to consider when you're playing a game. Take a look at that game between Arizona and New England last night. Guys, you knew that if you were on Arizona, that game was going to skyrocket last night. You knew everybody and their brother was going to jump on the Cardinals as the day progressed, with it being the primetime Sunday night game. You knew that was going to be the case, especially as it became more known that Ron Gronkowski wasn't going to play last night, right? And you saw that game skyrocket from 7 up to 8 to 8.5, even 9 points in some places. Great, again, if you were on the Patriots, because, again, 99.9% of the time you play the favorites early and you play the underdogs late. But let's backtrack for a second. Let's talk about those games that fall right around the number. Look at the Giants game, guys. Giants and the Cowboys, a 1-point decision. You know, the Giants were -1 at most books until about 9 o'clock Eastern time yesterday morning. Then for 2 to 3 hours, they went up to about a 1.5-point favorite, okay? And then they came back to 1. But again, if you were playing at some of those big offshore sports books, they were a solid 1.5 from the night prior, Saturday night, clear up until kickoff. Even went to 2 at some places. So again, if you were on the Cowboys, you wanted to play at those offshore books. Now, as a matter of convenience, a lot of guys are just lazy. That's how it is. A lot of gamblers are just lazy. They want to open one sportsbook account. They want to do all their action there, and that's it. And I'm telling you, you've got to have at least 2 sources. You got to have at least 2 accounts. If you're in Vegas, okay, I understand. You've got to be either playing online, or you got to be willing to get in your car and go someplace else. You know, you can go to any of the Stations casino places, and you're going to find a different line than you're going to find at the Winds or the Palms. You can go to the far end of the Strip, to the South Point, and you're going to find a higher price there most time on the favorites than you're going to find perhaps, again, at the Wynn or the Palms, or certainly at Caesars. It's just the way it is. It's a matter of whether or not you want to put in the work. And again, you also have to consider when you're betting the game. So, for example, if you knew you loved Arizona last week, hey, you should have been playing that game on Tuesday or Wednesday, because nothing was going to change other than the fact you knew going into Sunday that game was only going to go up. If you were playing that game any time later in the day yesterday, it was a foolish play, because that price was only going to go up. Forget the fact that Arizona didn't cover the game. Forget the fact that Arizona had no chance in that game. It's just the way it is. You got to always have a couple of different sources. And you look at some of those games yesterday falling right around the number, right around the price. Look at the Jets game with the Bengals. I mean, you know, depending on where and when you bet that game, depended on whether or not you can, you know, cash a ticket one side or another in that game. Same thing with the game between the Packers and the Jaguars, which is why I told you as a free pick yesterday, I thought that game could have went either way, but I loved the game going over, and that's why I gave you that one as a free pick. So again, 2 sources, guys, whether you're in Vegas or whether you're offshore. And if one of those sources offshore is one of those big books again, where they always screw you with that extra half point. It's not a bad thing to do, especially when you're considering playing the underdogs. It'll pay dividends over the long haul. Okay, a couple of things I noticed from yesterday's games. Listen, guys, I spent all night last night and most of the day today. I read every single game summary from not only the Associated Press, but I also go in and read what the beat writers say for every single team that played yesterday, because they are my eyes and ears. And before I even start looking at the lines for this week's games, before I start handicapping them, I want to see what happened yesterday on the field from their perspective. They were there. They were in the locker room, just like I used to do as a reporter. So they really have so much more insight than anyone else. So I read those game summaries and look at the box scores, and then I start handicapping the games. And these are just some of the little tidbits. Before I get to your free pick today, I thought I'd pass them on to you. Obviously, the Packers had their offense going yesterday. Rodgers, 20 for 34. What a difference Jordy Nelson made. Missed last year. It wasn't that he was such a key contributor on the field, only 6 for 32, but as I pointed out in yesterday's free pick talking about the Packers-Jaguars, just his mere presence opened up the field for everybody else. And you saw a Packers offense that last year was ranked 23rd in the league and 25th in passing, suddenly be able to move the ball up and down the field. But Blake Bortles, not too bad yesterday, 24 for 39, 320 yards. But the Jaguars, of course, coming up short. The Baltimore defense, 401 points the Ravens allowed last year. Yesterday, 160 yards and 7 points they gave up to the Buffalo Bills, which leads you to this question. Were the Bills that bad or the Ravens that good? Damned if I know. All I do know is that Tyrod Taylor was only 15 for 22 yesterday, 111 yards, 5 carries, 11 yards as well on the ground. The Texans, the other free pick yesterday. I told you my best bet was Philadelphia's yesterday. And I told you that I loved the Texans in that game. And even though the Texans started slowly and had to come up with a big fourth quarter output to get the cover in that game, I thought that if I was to play a parlay yesterday, I would have used Philadelphia and Houston, and it would have been a winner. Texans outscored Chicago 13-0 in the second half to get the cover, but you had to be happy with the way that Brock Osweiler played in his debut. 22 for 35, 231 yards, 2 touchdowns. Did have the 1 interception, but he spread the ball around. 8 different receivers got catches yesterday. But Lamar Miller, who I told you in yesterday's video report, I thought was the key free agent acquisition for the Texans yesterday. A career-high 32 touches yesterday. 28 rushes, 106 yards. This is a guy who was so underutilized by the Miami Dolphins last year. He wasn't underutilized yesterday. And that defense, number 3 last year overall, number 1 during the stretch drive for the Texans last season when they only allowed 12 points a game over the final 9 weeks of the season, may have suffered a big-time blow. I don't know, as the time I'm doing this video report, his middle linebacker Brian Cushing, who last year had 110 tackles, may have suffered a serious knee injury. But hey, Texans got the cover, 12-3 against the spread now in their last 15 as a favorite. They sacked Jay Cutler 5 times. Now, Chicago hosts Philadelphia on Monday night. And Philadelphia, Jim Schwartz, new defensive coordinator, plays at 4-3 defense. It's a wide 9 defense. Philadelphia, that defense, led by Fletcher Cox, is designed to constantly create havoc and put pressure on quarterbacks. They wreaked havoc against the Browns yesterday. What can they do against Jay Cutler on Monday night? Carson Wentz, the rookie. You talk about irony. The Browns traded away the second pick because the Browns front office felt that Carson Wentz was not a top 20 quarterback. He was not going to be a franchise quarterback. They had their heart set on Jared Goff, who, of course, probably won't even be active tonight for the Rams, right? So instead, they went out and they got RG3. And Robert Griffin III yesterday played miserably for a Browns team, which I'm telling you, of all the teams that I watched yesterday, that team may be the worst in the NFL. They do not have much talent. He had no playmakers, which is why I used Eagles as my best bet yesterday. And what happens, you talk about irony, he suffers a broken bone in the shoulder. He's out at least 8 weeks. They put him on injured reserve today. And Carson Wentz, the guy that they opted not to draft, goes 22 for 37, 278 yards, 2 beautiful, beautiful touchdown passes. But again, let's keep this into perspective before we put him into the Hall of Fame automatically next week. Playing at home, against a really, really bad Browns team. Tampa Bay, I told you on the video report yesterday that I thought Tampa would win against Atlanta and that I thought Jameis Winston was going to have a big year. 4 touchdown passes yesterday, 23 for 33, 281 yards. As the Bucs started off slowly, they were down 10-3, and then they came out like gangbusters from that point forward, took a 31-13 lead and eventually won at Atlanta 31-24. Falcons problem again. Last year, this defense had 19 sacks. Yesterday, how many sacks they had? 0, guys. Took the collar. Vikings outscored the Titans, rallied in the second half from a 10-0 halftime deficit to win that game 25-16. Otherwise, it looked like the Vikings, the same thing that happened to them last year when they lost their opener on the road to San Francisco in the first Monday night game. Remember, it was a excuse me, guys, 20-3 deficit. They lost that game, and it looked like the same thing was going to happen yesterday. Adrian Peterson, non-existent, 19 carries, 31 yards. Sean Hill, 18 for 36, 236. Be interesting to see if him or Sam Bradford gets the call against the Packers this weekend. But hey, bottom line, the Vikings got another cover. 14-3 against the spread last year. They are now 25-9 against the spread since Mike Zimmer took over with 8 straight covers. They, of course, are at home next week. Meanwhile, the Titans are now 5-17-3 in their last 24 against the spread at home. 7-23-2. They're skid as a underdog. Meanwhile, how about Cincinnati? A.J. Green, 12 catches, 180 yards, covered primarily by Darrelle Revis yesterday. So much for that matchup, huh? Andy Dalton, nice game yesterday, 366 yards. Surprising, I say, because he was sacked 7 times in that one. Ryan Fitzpatrick, yeah. We went out, we paid you the big money for 1 year, and you delivered 19 for 35, 189 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Not exactly what we paid you for. You talk about irony in this game. Nick Folk for the Jets, missed a point after attempt, had a field goal blocked as well. That cost them the game. He had made 322 point after attempts in a row, an NFL record, regular and postseason combined before that one. That's the way the cookie crumbles in that one. Meanwhile, Kansas City, how about the Kansas City defense yesterday? Allowed 155 yards rushing, almost 5 yards a carry yesterday to San Diego. That's one of the reasons they found themselves down 24-3 in the third quarter. Meanwhile, they only had 1 sack of Phillip Rivers yesterday, who carved up their defense. FYI, their best pass rusher, Justin Houston, probably out until at least November as he recovers from knee surgery. Seattle, right? Seattle, 12-10 over Miami. Okay, the Seahawks came back and won that game. Seattle, another one of those teams, like Green Bay, a slow starter yesterday offensively. Arizona, down 10-0 in the first quarter yesterday. Just makes me wonder when I see these teams that come out in week number 1 and struggle offensively. Makes you wonder, we had 4 preseason games. Nobody plays in week number 4. The only time the starters really see any substantial action is week number 3 when they play a first half. I don't care how much you practice. If this was a high-end budget, I'd immediately have the sound guy cue up Allen Iverson, practice, and use that sound bite. But hey, no matter how much you practice, it is not game conditions. And you gotta wonder, when these teams start off so slow and you see teams struggling offensively in week number 1, could it be that training camp really didn't get these guys ready to roll? Meanwhile, how about the Indianapolis Colts? Yesterday, that defense, or lack thereof, allowed the Detroit Lions to gain 116 yards on the ground. This is a Lions team that only averaged an NFL low 83.4 yards on the ground a year ago. The Cowboys, they lost again yesterday. What a surprise. Tony Romo's out. Cowboys 1-12 straight up their last 13 games without Tony Romo there. So that's a quick little rundown of what happened yesterday and why you may have lost or may have won some money. Listen, the Pittsburgh game with Washington, with Pittsburgh tonight, 2 of their 3 top receivers from a year ago are out this evening, and they accounted for 94 catches. Bryant, of course, suspended for the season. Wheaton out with a shoulder injury. They're already without Bell, but listen, D'Angelo Williams is going to be playing tonight. Not a bad fill-in a year ago as he ran for over 900 yards and averaged nearly 5 yards a carry, and he will be running the ball tonight against an absolutely dreadful Washington run defense. that gave up nearly 4.8 yards per carry to opposing backs a year ago, ranked 31st in the league. Meanwhile, Ben Roethlisberger, even though he doesn't have Wheaton, does not have Bryant, should still have success with Antonio Brown and most likely Darius, what was that guy? He was a Raiders washout. Darius Haywood-Bay and the rookie Sammy Coates probably seeing substantial action at wide receiver going up against a Redskins secondary, which has been bolstered with the acquisition of the big talker from Carolina, Josh Norman. Problem is, Redskins still don't have a pass rush, right? Weren't able to get to anybody last year. There's a reason they were ranked 28th in the league against the pass a year ago. And you've got a Pittsburgh team that averaged 28 points last season, and that was with Roethlisberger throwing 16 interceptions versus just 21 touchdowns. On the other side of the field, you have Washington. Kirk Cousins, was he a one-year wonder, a flash in the pan? All I know is he threw for over 4,100 yards, completed nearly 70% of his passes, has a bevy of wide receivers and a great tight end in Jordan Reed. Can't run the ball versus for a lick the Washington Redskins can't. So, I don't know. You know, I grew up a Steelers fan. Listen, for as bad as the Eagles were in the early 70s, you think I grew up being an Eagles fan? Christ. You know, I was watching Terry Bradshaw and Rocky Bleier and Franco and company, okay? I grew up a Steelers fan. I want to see the Steelers win tonight. But bottom line, Mike Tomlin just doesn't do it for me. 4-8 against the spread. Last 12 as a road chalk. So, I don't know which way to go in this game. That's why I used the total in the contest. Let's get down to the free picks. San Francisco, Chip Kelly making his debut for the 49ers. 49ers, a 2.5-point underdog. It's a guess, guys. Listen, I love both of yesterday's free picks, but I'm going to go with San Francisco plus the 2.5. I would go ahead and buy up the half point if you're getting them at 2.5, 3.5, which I don't think the line's going to go up that high. I think what the 49ers are going to do here tonight, they're going to come out and establish the run with Carlos Hyde. Remember, that's what they did last year in their season opener against the Vikings. Hyde had a monster game in that one, 168 yards. They pulled the upset 20-3. A lot of people think that, you know, what Chip Kelly likes to do with that offense of his is to throw the ball nonstop. Not really. He really ran the ball nonstop in Philadelphia. That's what he intended to do last year with DeMarco Murray. Unfortunately, DeMarco Murray was washed up, but that's what he did the 2 years prior with LaShawn McCoy, who had the two best years of his career. That's what I think he's going to do with Carlos Hyde tonight. That's what he did in the first couple of preseason games as well. Didn't do so much and do so well in game number 3, but that's because he started Kaepernick instead of Blaine Gabbert. Gabbert, listen, he is what he is. He's a guy who has an 8-27 career record as a starter in the NFL, but he's a guy in 10 games last year who threw for over 2,000 yards and had 10 touchdown passes, and the 49ers didn't exactly surround them with a lot of playmakers last year. As for the Rams, if Case Keenum was any good, they wouldn't have drafted Jared Goff. And if Jared Goff was that good, he wouldn't be the third-string quarterback tonight, right? They got Todd Gurley. Okay, they got Todd Gurley. I just have a feeling that Chip Kelly and the 49ers are going to be primed here tonight. I like them in this game. Of course, it's a free pick, which means my money's not on it, and I'd be leery of putting your money on it as well. Anyway, that'll do it, guys. I wish you well, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow when we do this one more time.